Good evening or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. It is your girl, Marcie Thomas, and I am super excited to be here again for another episode of Live Well Sister. So as you're coming into the space, you can let us know where you're joining us from. If you know anyone who you think might be interested in learning about what it means to unfold, you want to go ahead and invite them so that they can be a part of this wonderful conversation. So for those of you who may be here for the first time or watching for the first time later on, my name once again is Marcie Thomas. I'm the founder of Brown Girl Collective, which has been around since 2009 actually, and this particular platform, Live Well Sister, have been doing this for the last couple of years. So it just really means a lot to me for us to come together and have really important conversations about how we can do just that. Live well, and tonight is no exception. So I didn't say where I am. I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio, currently living on the outskirts of the ATL. So if you're in the ATL area, you might see me out in the streets from time to time. So this evening, I am super excited to have a very important woman with us. She's doing big things in the world, and she's taking a little bit of time out of her busy schedule to share some time with us. So our guest for the evening is Arielle Estoria, who is a poet, speaker, and actor. She co-authored 2 collections of poetry, Vagabonds and Zealots, and Write Bloody, Spill Pretty, and has shared her work through spoken word and keynote talks with companies such as Google, Lululemon, Apple, and more. She has emceed conferences such as the Yellow Conference and led writing and self-acceptance workshops. She has also been making strides in the commercial and television worlds as a SAG-eligible actor and has been seen in commercials for brands like Etsy, Starbucks, PayPal, TJ Maxx, and more. A native of Northern California, she currently lives in LA with her husband, and she's here to talk about The Unfolding. I know that light is crazy, but The Unfolding, which is an invitation to come home to yourself. So without any further ado, welcome Arielle.
Hello, thank you. What a beautiful introduction.
You're so welcome. I'm super excited to have you here with somebody, because when I was looking at the places that you've been, I'm like, I think I've seen you in some commercials.
Yes.
I've actually seen you.
That's always fun. I know. My grandma usually is my favorite person. She's like, "Are you in this commercial?" And I'm like, "Yes, I am." That's me.
How cool is that? So while your story is so powerful and impactful, and you really summarize a lot of things that you have experienced in this book, but just as a means of introduction, just give us a little background about, besides the things that you've done, just like where you're from and kind of how you found your way into this creative space.
Yeah, so I'm originally from the Bay Area here in California. So I'm a California girl, born and raised, just went from the north to the south. So I currently reside in Los Angeles or Pasadena area, and all of my family is still in the Bay Area. So I was just there this last weekend for one of my first readings out of there for my book. And so all my siblings are there. I'm the oldest of 5 kids. So there's 4 girls and my brother Zion, and he's the youngest.
Oh, wow.
And yes, come from a very big family. Still have a 510 number, still still identify as the Bay Area being home and a space of home. I say that the Bay Area grew me, and LA raised me, and so I really I believe that wholeheartedly. And I've been in Los Angeles for about 13 years now. I moved here for school. I studied psychology and theater, thinking that I would do art therapy for gifted children or children on the spectrum. And then the more I got involved in creativity, the more that kind of pulled me in a different direction. But a lot of my heart does have this psychology mindset to it as well. So I like to say that that has helped me pull on heartstrings. I am 3 years married. So my spouse, my partner, and I got married in COVID. And
Oh, wow.
so we've been like living that journey. So I guess we're not technically newlyweds, even though we're still seeing people that we haven't seen in years who are still saying congratulations. So that's the kind of space we're sitting in right now. And so yeah, I'm a wife, I'm a plant mom, I am a breakfast like connoisseur. I will not eat any other meal before I've had breakfast.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I've always been a creative. I've always been an artist, and now I get to do that as a living.
Wow. And thank you so much for sharing, because that just gives us insight into who you are as we start to, really dive into some of the themes and things in the book. Now, of course, with this being kind of like, I guess people would call it like self-help, inspirational.
Sure.
It's not like a story that we're going to tell per se, but we do want to, for those who don't watch, I only do themes. I don't tell you the whole thing, because the purpose is for you to read it.
Yes.
And, Arielle, as I was telling you earlier, I myself personally just really enjoyed the book so much. I was supposed to be doing something else over the weekend, but I dove into your book and spent the time reading and marking and, folding pages down and all of that, because it's just so powerful. So The Unfolding, an invitation to come home to yourself. So before we get into the themes, just kind of give us a snippet of what we're going to find in this book, or what the future readers will find in this book.
Yes. So The Unfolding is, first and foremost, it's my story of how I've been able to expand, to shift and to change. And the idea of The Unfolding is, as we're experiencing these new perspective shifts and as we're growing into these full-fledged, beautiful humans, we start to peel back some layers of who we were. We shed these conditionings, we shed boxes that we no longer fit in. And so for me, it was this really intense season, and I realized all the trickles in which I had been continuously unfolding, even though it felt like it was happening all at once. And so this book really allowed me to scale back and to notice all the ways that I've been shifting, all the ways that I've been expanding my views of divinity and my views of God, and how that expanded as who I felt like I was as a woman and as a Black woman and as an artist. And so The Unfolding is, first and foremost, it's my heart's feelings. A lot of the poems that you see are things that I needed to tell myself to carry me through this season of being disoriented, of changing and being told that those weren't positive changes, and the ways that I've been able to navigate through choosing myself and knowing that my discernment and that my wisdom was true, and that it was guiding, and that I could trust the decisions I was making and the life I was building. And so I share those journeys, those stories with you in essays, and poetry, and then each of the phases, which I'm sure we'll get into, all of those end in reflection questions, because ultimately, I think a lot of times with self-help, it's like, here's my story. It works for everyone. And I really don't believe that that's a reality. And so I put the reflection questions in there so that you could sit with it. You could explore, what season am I in? Where in my unfolding have I been? And being able to navigate through some journal prompts to carry you through those.
Right. And that is a really good synopsis. I'm sitting here smiling. That's good. Because it is a really good synopsis of what the book is about. And I think, it resonated with me a lot, because yes, that was a particular season in your life, but I've had seasons in my life where I feel like I've been unfolding. And that's what makes it so rich, because yes, it's your story. And, some of the, of course, the players are different, the situations are different, but I could feel and see myself in that, okay,
Yeah.
there are ways in which I have been unfolding and going through all these
Mhm.
different phases without necessarily having words, to express it or
Yeah.
behind it. And you do such a good job
Yeah.
of kind of helping us to navigate that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I definitely wanted it to be, I didn't want it to just be my story that was being read and it was like, okay, good for her, or like, okay, that was great, proud of her. I didn't want that at all. Like I wanted people to be able to read it and be like, oh, this is naming things that I didn't know how to name before, or this is
Mhm.
describing what I've been so frustrated with not being able to describe, or this is bringing me back to a moment of when I realized this. And even though for me personally, my unfolding was, undoing and deconstructing specifically some faith elements that I was raised with that didn't fit where I was and who I was, even though that was specifically my story. I've heard that, for other people who don't identify as spiritual people, that there's still something about it
Mhm.
that's still connected with them. So I really have always wanted to write as an artist and as someone who, identifies as Christian. I always wanted it to be a bigger conversation. I always wanted it to be an expansive conversation. And so I feel like if people don't resonate with their own stuff and start doing their own work, then I feel like I'm not doing my job. Yeah.
Right, right. And you brought up actually where I was going to go next before we get into the different phases. The whole fact of faith. And really this is a big piece of your faith journey, not all of it, but it's a piece of
Yeah.
your faith journey. And I think that a lot of people, some of the same struggles that you have gone through, others have, but they just don't
Mm,
necessarily want to admit to it or,
yeah.
admit to it out loud.
Right.
Or they don't
Right.
know how to explore it. And I mean, just really briefly, I know in your case, you grew up in a home with a minister, a pastor. That wasn't really my story. We went to church, but we didn't go to church that frequently. So my
Right.
faith journey began, later in life. But I found
Mm,
that there are a lot of things that didn't necessarily fit the person that I was or that
yes.
I am now.
Yes.
And sometimes
Yeah.
it does become a thing of I've heard people say you chew the meat, spit out the fat, and
Uh-huh.
and you
Uh-huh.
kind of navigate things the way that suits you, which can be a challenge
Yeah.
with when others have ideas of who and what you should be and how you should do things.
Yeah, most of my upbringing was under the umbrella of not just Christianity, but specifically evangelical and Baptist faith, which for the Baptist denomination, if anyone is not familiar, I mean, they still don't believe that women can preach to everyone. There's still a lot of stipulations on how women can and cannot be on stage. So I learned very quickly that that was not the space for me, because as I was constantly being thrown on stages and being called, to speak my mind and to be in public spaces, and that was very like strange for my upbringing. So for me, I always had to like reconcile, well, is me being this still where I'm called to be? Is this still the fullness of my purpose, even though I'm being told that women have no place here? That this is not the role that we're meant to carry, even though I'm carrying it, and I'm embodying it and living it. And so a lot of for me, it was a disembodied faith. I didn't grow up with awareness about how to be in my physical body, how to be a woman who knows how to call her skin her own, how to tap into what it means to be a sexual being. Like all of that was like very outside of me. I wasn't allowed to tap into it. So it became a point where I'm like, dear, I'm not functioning as a whole human because of this very small sliver of how I've been told to carry this type of spirituality and this type of faith. And that was really disorienting because so much of that was the identity I was given. You
Mhm.
are Christian before you are black, before you are a woman,
Mhm.
before you are all these other identities. And so I didn't know how to be the other identities because I only knew how to be this. So in my late 20s and now my early 30s, I'm figuring out now what it feels like and what it means to be a whole self, that I'm a mind, a body, and a spirit, and
Mhm.
that I'm not just one of those things.
Right, right. And that's so powerful. And I'm ready to get into it because some of the other
Yeah.
stuff is gonna come up as we go through the different, the different phases that you have in here. But that whole thing of, you are a Black woman who is a Christian and not I'm just a
Yes.
Christian, because in the world,
Yes.
when they see you, they don't know that you're a Christian. They see Black woman
Right.
before they
They
see
see you're
anything
black.
else.
Yes. Yes.
Before they
Exactly.
see anything else. So yes, so that's a
Exactly.
thing. So in this process of the unfolding, you start with the awakening. So tell us a little bit
Mhm.
about what it means to awaken.
Yeah. So in that awakening space, it was just coming to reality with, what I actually believed about a lot of things and being able to say it out loud. But it was really scary because I hadn't been saying it out loud. I hadn't been coming to terms with it. So this awakening for me was, I always say it's kind of like after you take that afternoon nap and it was real good, but you wake up and you're like, where am I? Who am I? Whose house
Mhm.
is this? It's just this disorienting space. And the awakening was this disorienting space. I was waking up to this person who didn't look super unfamiliar, but also felt very distant from me at the same time. And it was that, startling aspect of, am I allowed to be this person? Am I allowed to walk and declare these things and express that my faith is shifting and changing, even though I had been known for one type of person? And that was my
Mhm.
biggest fear was, in the awakening, was like realizing I'm not who I think I am anymore, and
Mhm.
maybe I never was. And now I'm just being
Mm.
honest with myself about it. And so that awakening is that coming to this self, this newer self. And I say there's kind of two versions of it. There could be a version where you've always been this person, you're just now finally giving yourself permission to be it. Or the vice versa is you have been shoving this down, you have been shoving this person down, you've been suppressing this person because you're so afraid to be that, because our fear of not belonging, because of our fear of not being accepted. And so the awakening is that coming to of things are shifting. I am shifting. And what do I do with it?
Yeah, and I mean that's a big thing, whether it's faith or other things. It could be,
Yes.
folks expected you to pursue a certain career path, or
Mm-hmm.
it comes up in your book as well. Who are you going to marry? Who are
Mm-hmm.
you supposed to marry?
Right.
I mean, it can
Right.
show up in a whole lot of different ways where you
Yes.
have to discover who it is that you want to be and begin to walk in that. And a big part of that is learning how to be okay with not pleasing others.
Mm-hmm. I'm still working on that one. My that like it's out. The book is out, but I still had a moment of like, can I say these things out loud now? Like I
Mhm.
wrote them down. I've been hiding away for 2 years now, and I put it all in a book. But do I have the audacity now to say it out loud? To speak these things that I've written and that I feel and that I know and that I am, but then like say it out loud to my parents, say it out loud to my family, say it out loud to people who've known a version of me that doesn't exist anymore. And that's still very terrifying. I'm still learning how to say yes to myself, how to say yes to the life I'm making, how to say yes to the life I'm making and not feel like I have to fix it or make it feel like it needs to please other people. And I had a mentor, who asked me like, what decisions would you make without the applause of other people? Like, what
Mm.
decisions would you make if people weren't having this expectation of you? And people are always having expectations of us. And do we do life differently? Do we answer questions differently because of those eyes? Because we're afraid of who's about to leave and start talking about us or whatever. And so it is still something I have to work on because I'm also an artist. I'm also a human. I want to be liked. I want to be accepted, but I realized I couldn't do that at the risk of not being my full self. I could no longer be only half of me because that's what was being accepted and being held. That became more stifling. So I needed to show up as my full self in order for people to even know what they're holding and what they're accepting.
Right. And as you're saying that, and I'm listening, and even as I read it, I think of the fact that, I mean, I know all people probably struggle with that in some form or
Yeah.
fashion, but I think women probably more so.
Hmm.
This whole thing of I have to show up in a certain way for people to accept me or for them to think I'm a
Yes.
good girl or, whatever
Yes.
all of these things are.
Yes.
So do you find that to be true just in some of the things that you
Yeah.
studied or just even your own personal experience?
Oh, entirely. I feel like when it comes to like there's a statistic and I don't know what the numbers are specifically, but it's a huge gap. I think it's like almost 70 or 80% of men versus like 20, 15 or 25% of women will apply for a job, and men will apply to a job where they have at least two or three of the
Mm,
specifications that they're asking. Women won't apply unless we meet every single one. So
mm,
just that, like, I forget, that's years ago, and the numbers have probably changed, I hope, but this is years ago that I found that information, and just how we as women already limit ourselves unless we can show up as perfect, whatever
mm,
perfect is and whatever perfect means. So you think of that and you think of, okay, where standards have given us to, what standard society has given us to, what list is that? Do we meet every single one? What standards our family have given us? Do we meet every single one? And then
mhm,
you add all the different elements. You add being a black woman. What standards are that? Do I meet every single one? Like we're boxed in almost by
mm.
these standards and by these lists of people and ways and attributes that we have to meet in order to show up, in order to be accepted, in order to have a seat at the table, in order to take up the space that we know we're created to take up, but we're only going to take it up if we meet every single one of these. And then
Right.
that's where imposter syndrome comes in, because
Woo.
then we feel like we can take up that space. Well, these are my accolades. This is what I've done. This is how I fit into these little tiny boxes to show up here. But what if we release all of that and we just get to take up space because we're here, because we're breathing, because we're alive, because we're made to take up space, you know? And so it definitely has been something where I've learned, I've watched, I've been in a lot of rooms with a lot of women who just continuously ask, why am I here? I don't deserve this, I'm not that. And all of that is just us having to continuously unfold or unbox ourselves from these guidelines that honestly were not realistic to meet in the first place.
Right, right. And you said the word release a couple seconds ago. In the book, there was a part about releasing old stories. So, whatever those
Yeah.
stories are that you have been told about who you should be or how you should show up,
Hmm.
we have to begin. Part of the awakening is releasing those old stories.
Yes. That and allowing yourself to not be that anymore. You know, I just had the honor of seeing Nedra Tawwab, who is a
Yeah.
brilliant author, psychologist. Her and Dr. Tama, who both are just the most brilliant of minds, and they were in conversation about her book that just came out, Drama
Right.
Free, and she talked about how negatively we always get, oh, well, you're changing, you're this and you're that. And oftentimes we get defensive about it. And she was like, but what if you just said instead, like, yeah, I am. Yeah. You know, that I am. You're right. I have changed.
Mhm.
What, look at that, you know, like,
Right.
and what a blessing, you know?
Right.
And then there's also space for, especially as people in the spotlight, women who are constantly being, needed and being needed to be in certain ways, being able to be like, oh, that was an old version of me, that
Mhm.
was nine Aries ago, I'm not that Ari anymore, you know. And being
Mhm.
able to release those parts of ourselves, I think, is part of the work of growing, because also, who wants to stay the same? Are
Right.
we being human? Are we living fully if we stay the same? So allowing ourselves to reframe that negative aspect of you're different, you've changed, and allow ourselves to be like, yes,
Yes,
thank
I
you for
have.
noticing.
And
Thank you. Yes. And
yes,
what
but
about it?
right, right. But like, okay, yeah, and it's a good thing that I've
Hmm.
changed because who wants to stay the same forever and ever?
Hmm.
So the next phase we talk about the eclipsing. So what is the eclipsing all about?
Yeah. So the eclipsing is that moment where you do realize, okay, I am changing. And there is a lot of fear and grief that happens within those changes because it is familiar to be this person. It is safer to be that person that everyone knows, that everyone's familiar with, and where the boundaries are created or not created, and it's easier that way. It's There's a lot of grief that comes with like existing as maybe not a new human, but an evolved human, and wondering like, do I need to try and fit myself back in this box? And I definitely did that in the beginning of my eclipsing. It was, I'm not awakened, like I haven't woken up to who I am in this moment. Absolutely not. I can fit back in this box. I can fit back in this role I've been given. I can fit back in this thing that makes me small. And you realize you can't stuff yourself back into, like, I'm a plant mom, so I have a lot of plants, and I can't put
Okay.
a plant back in a small pot. It doesn't work. If I'm repotting it, I'm putting in something bigger so that it can flourish in that space, that it has room to grow. And the same goes for us, but I was really afraid. Like, is this allowed? Can I do this? Can I be this? And so that eclipsing space was a lot of anxiety, a lot of voices on, forcing me to go back, forcing me to fit in that space. And then also a lot of voices urging me and encouraging me to move forward. So that eclipsing is that shadow season. I talk about two types of eclipses, a lunar and a solar. And in that, it seems like the darkness lasts forever, but it's
Mhm.
just a season. And I think it's a necessary ingredient and season that's added, but it is nonetheless it can be a very hard one.
It definitely can. We have a question from the audience. Do you find yourself stepping forward only when you feel like you're better than at least one other person? Wow. For example, if
Ooh.
I am the worst player on a team, I wouldn't stay on the team. Thanks.
Mm. Do you find yourself stepping forward only when you feel like you're better than at least one other person? That is such an interesting question, and one that I haven't really thought of. If anything, I step forward because I see something missing. Like, I step forward because I'm like, this is what I offer, this is what I bring to the table, and I don't see that listed here. So I kind of do the opposite. I see the list, and I'm like, okay, I meet these, but also I add this element that they didn't even think they needed,
Right.
and I might be what they needed. And so I find myself stepping forward when I feel that pull. I also get like very, very, very significant like gut responses to either
Mhm.
show up, to approach someone. And as I've built my career, and as networking has been a huge part of my career, I've had to learn how to just go up and be like, here's my card, here's what I do, here's my book, because
Mhm.
otherwise, if we're quiet and small about it, how are people going to know? So I feel like I step forward when I feel like there's something missing that I could fill, and I step forward because I know I'm bringing something to the table that isn't being brought, or that isn't being offered, or that isn't even aware that it's needed. So I feel like when we step forward, when at least there's one other person who's like less than us, it creates this weird hierarchy and this like,
Mhm. Right.
unnecessary ladder building that I don't subscribe to. So I think it's not the worst player, but it's, they're not contributing what I'm contributing. So let me just add
Right.
myself to this mix.
Right,
Mhm.
and I'll step in and say something about that as well. Because I mean, even let's just say for me in this space, doing what I'm doing right now,
Yeah.
it's not so much that I feel like I'm better than somebody else, but I do
Right.
feel like I have something to bring to the table, and in a
Yeah.
different way because nobody's gonna show up like Marcie T,
Mhm.
but Marcie T. So,
Exactly.
so that's why I'm in this space. And, I said it last
Yeah.
week or, a couple weeks ago on one of the shows, even if only one or two people catch it and, and run with it, that's,
Mhm.
that's all that matters to me. It's not so much,
Yeah.
a comparison. Cause to be honest, I mean, yeah, I know some of the things that other people are doing, but I don't watch them like that because I
Right.
feel like the only
Right.
person that I need to be better than is I need to be improving every day, not so much saying,
Yes.
oh, am I doing more or this person have more followers or this
Yeah.
person doing more of
Right.
this or that. It's
Yeah.
like, how can I improve? How can I make things better? So
Yes.
that's just, my little 2 cents.
Yeah, that's a great question, Tracks. And also just, yeah, as much as we can avoid the comparison, like I try not to be operated or motivated by what other people are or not doing. I try to really be like, a horse with like that races has blinders on. I try to
Mhm.
really be as focused as I can in my own lane. And sometimes I deter off and I start looking at someone else's Instagram or looking at someone else's career, and I start, down. I'm traumatic. So I won't be like, oh, look what she's doing. That's amazing. I'm like, well, I'm done. I guess I'm throwing in the towel. Like
Right.
it's all her. And so I know for me, I have to keep my blinders on. I can't look at other people operating not as well or better than me. I have to stay in this kind of lane right here. Yeah.
And one of the things in that eclipsing that you talk about is, of course, that's when those beliefs are starting to be dismantled. That's when you're beginning to learn what freedom looks like for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, what freedom looked like for me, and that went into, from the eclipsing, this illuminating, like, okay, the shadow didn't last forever. The grieving didn't last forever, but what did I learn in there? Like I'm a huge believer that, grief, that loss, that pain, that sorrow, I am not afraid of emotion. I'm a big feeler of all of it. Give me the whole gamut. And so for me, it was like, how can I learn from this grieving season? How can I learn from this loss season? How can I learn in this shadow space versus just trying to avoid it or get through it faster? What am I being taught here? And what I was being taught was leaving room for the light to come in. I was being
Mhm.
taught to make space for, yeah, this is a moment, this is a season, but it's not breaking you and you're not drowning. Your head is still above water, and then the light comes in, and then it's a little bit more of a grounded sense of being able to decide, okay, now what do I bring with me? What do I want as a part of who I was that still fit who I am today? And then what do I want to leave? And getting in that process, we illuminate it, we shed light to it, and then we mend it. I skipped a
Mhm.
little bit, but
But yeah, you did, but it's all good. It's all good. Yes, for letting the light in. I have a lot of little notes here. In that
Mm.
illumination, that's actually the fourth one, but we'll go there since we're already there. Because and that is the other part of what you say in the book is that it ebbs and flows. Some things go in a
Yes.
particular order. Sometimes you're a little bit of awakening, a little bit of eclipsing, a little bit of illuminating, all at the same time. It just really depends
Yeah.
on, what's happening in your life. But in that space of illumination, that's, you talk about a place where you can have new perspectives, when you
Mm.
have permission to do certain things because the light is
Mm.
shining. So just
Yeah.
a little bit more about that.
Yeah, my favorite alliteration, or like thought with this is if you travel at all and you travel through the night and you don't get to your destination, you get to your destination in the nighttime. And then you go to sleep and then you wake up and it's light and you're in this new place and there's so much wonder, there's so much to explore. Maybe you've been there before, but it still feels different and a little better in the light. I think that's a lot of what the illuminating space was for me. I had been driving through the night, I had been got to my destination in the dark, and then woke up in the light, and there's just this freshness to it. Okay, let's get our coffee, let's go explore, let's figure out where we're at and who we are in the midst of this. And so that illumination space still tainted with a little bit of grief, still very present in the like coming to of the light, if you will. But there's still this little bit more of awareness of like, okay, in that shedding, I realize who I am now. Like in
Mhm.
that shedding, I realize what's being brought into the light. I realize who's being brought into the light. And then there's something about dancing, that I just continuously come back to as I work on being, a person who tries her best to be embodied and to help other people be embodied, is this idea of dancing in the light. There's just so much freedom in that, especially after seasons of grief. And so dancing, with this present self, dancing in the fullness that you exist in that moment, and sitting in that and basking in the warmth of what that feels like.
Yes, and
Yeah.
that's just so powerful thinking about that. And grief is, I'm gonna go back now. The grief part
Yeah.
is, it's something because you talk about the whole thing and the mending, which comes before the illuminating in the book, that
Hmm.
you can be in a space of grief, but then also be in a space of celebration at the same time.
Yes. The yes and I
Mhm.
say in improvisation there's an exercise where you can only say yes and you cannot say no to your partner. So if they're like, the moon is falling out of the sky and it's actually not a moon, it's a pizza. You have to say you can't say no. Like that's bizarre. You have to say yes. Oh my gosh, and I think a pepperoni just fell on my face. And so I think of the conversation of both grief and joy being this yes, this can exist and this can exist. Like I was sharing with you earlier, my partner and I got married in COVID, and the week we got married, obviously not when we thought we were going to get married in a
Right.
global pandemic, so it made shift really quick just because we really wanted. We didn't know how long we were going to be in this, so we are like, well, let's just figure this out. Like we could get
Right.
married, we could do the court stuff later, like let's just be together. And so we had our marriage, we had our wedding on May 23rd, and then my uncle passed away literally the next day.
Mm.
So we're sitting away kind of for our mini little honeymoon in Pismo Beach, and I'm sitting with my new partner, my new spouse, the love of my life, while also holding space for my uncle, who is very dear to me. And then that next week, we came back to Pasadena, and the murder of George Floyd happened, and it
Mm.
was just thing after thing after thing, and you're like, can I be happy here? Can I express joy here? And can I hold grief at the same time? And I think sometimes we have to hold both in the same breath. I think that's honestly sometimes the fullest aspect of living is when it's just the waves that we experience. And sometimes it's exhausting and we need to give ourselves some rest and
Right.
some grace in that space. But I think every single time it's necessary to know that, like, if there are things that bring joy and that bring celebration, there's room for that. In the same breath, that there's room for the things that hurt and the things that operate in grief and loss, and that sometimes we have to hold both in some moments the same breath.
And one of the reasons I was telling you that the book resonated with me so much is actually 5 years ago, my father passed away March 3rd of 2018.
Mm,
And so we just came up on an anniversary, little less than a couple weeks ago. And he's been heavy, heavy, heavy on my mind. Because I was
mm.
daddy's girl, bona fide daddy's girl. I'm still a daddy's girl, even though daddy's not here.
Yes,
A lot of this
yes,
reading stuff is because of daddy. So
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
but in the past few weeks, while I was going through, my thoughts and all of that about him, some really positive things are happening at the same time. And
Yeah.
I found myself like, wow, feeling some type of way because, oh, wow, all these wonderful things are going on, but I'm sad because daddy's not here to walk
Mhm.
with me.
Yeah,
And so just
yeah.
the whole thing of, okay, yeah, I'm happy, but I'm also sad at
Mhm.
the time. And
Mhm.
laughing one minute and then I'm crying the next
Yeah.
just because,
Yes.
just the ebbs and flows of life and, and just the different things that go on. So that was one
Yeah.
of the things that really stood out to me in reading that, like, yeah, you can be in both places at the same time. And you talked
Mhm.
about Kent, I'm probably gonna say it, Kintsugi, is that right? The Japanese art?
Kintsugi. Mhm.
Yes, because it's so funny though, Aria. As I was reading and I kind of knew where the book was going, I was thinking about that because I'm like, yeah, when things fall apart and then you put them back together in a different way and it looks more
Yeah.
beautiful. I was thinking
Yeah.
about that. And then when I saw it in the book, I'm like, yes.
Yes. Yes. If you don't, I mean, like, if you don't know Kintsugi, so it's Kintsugi, I believe.
Yes, it
Like,
is.
look, just Google that in, and the pictures that come up, like, the pieces are stunning. So the art of Kintsugi is the Japanese art of taking broken glass or clay pieces and molding them together with this like shiny, beautiful, like gold glue. And the artwork that you find in this is so gorgeous. And my favorite aspect is that you don't not see where it was broken. You see where the pieces were put back together, and yet it's still whole, and yet it's absolutely gorgeous. And so I think that's why I wanted that visual of like, we're not going to ignore that this was painful. We're not going to ignore that we have been shattered, that there are pieces of ourselves that we are now picking up. But I also want to bring in this little silver lining, this little gold lining, that it can still be beautiful, that you can still mend, that you can still, have grief, but also hold hope and expectation and joy. And so the visual of Kintsugi is a really stunning visual. And I felt like it was the perfect depiction of like picking up these pieces of who we are and bringing them together with this newness, this gold lining, this gold glue that's just really stunning.
It definitely is. And ironically, again, well, you see paintings and stuff behind me. These are actually things that
Mhm.
I painted.
Stunning.
And thank you, thank you. But one of the things I haven't done it because it's been a while since I picked up a brush. But one of the things that I have been thinking is doing something like kintsugi in the photos, in the paintings, to just show
Yeah,
that
yeah.
oftentimes we as Black women, as women in general, people in general, but
Right,
specifically Black women,
right,
'cause that's what I relate to,
right. Uh-huh.
that there can be pieces of us, but then there's this
Mm,
gold, there's this silver, there's this platinum that
yeah,
keeps us together and just makes us even more beautiful in spite of of the scars that
yeah.
we may have. So you may have inspired me to go ahead and do that, to create
Yes,
something like
please
that.
do. I look forward to seeing how that comes to fruition.
Yes, because I mean it's just true because we do walk around with a lot of broken pieces oftentimes.
Mm,
And we don't sometimes we don't take the time to figure out how to bring it together in a way and make it more
yeah.
beautiful, understanding that, we all have good and bad in our lives and we can take the
Mhm.
time and do the work and I know you do yoga and meditation and
Yeah,
journaling and
yeah,
all of
all
these
of it.
things, therapy, whatever it is, to help take some of those things and say, yeah, that wasn't so cool. That's not so pretty. But what can I
Yeah.
do to turn it around and make it something beautiful?
Yes, absolutely. And also knowing that we don't have to carry those pieces with us,
Mhm.
as we let them, as we release them and let them go, we only pick up what fits and what makes sense for this thing that we're
Mhm.
creating. And we leave the rest, and that becomes what our past is made of. These pieces of who we were that we are no longer, and it's not that we are made up of those things, but that's a part of who we are
Mhm.
and what we've left behind and who we've become as a result of it all.
Mhm.
Mhm.
But in
Yeah.
this part, like you also talked about, of course, becoming undone. And some of that is because like in the case of the book, you are talking about relationships and things like that changing and then just
Yeah.
finding a way to bring yourself back together, sometimes maybe having to create boundaries or do different things even in terms of
Mm.
those relationships as a part of that mending.
Yeah. I think that's the sometimes the hardest work is we do so much work here. We do so much work with ourselves. We're like, oh phew, okay, I feel great. But then something else comes, another person, another, conversation, a family member starts to disrupt, that work and that healing, which is I think where boundaries come into play. As we were sitting here doing this work and I picked up this piece, I've left the rest, but somebody else is coming and picking up pieces that I had left behind. Talking about, you forgot this. No, I didn't forget this. I knew exactly where it was, and that's where it should have stayed. And so boundaries come up into don't bring those old pieces of who I am. Don't bring those old versions of who I am up. That's not who's existing today. Let's have a conversation now. And also, this is who I am now. Put that piece down. If that and a lot of times it's because those pieces are familiar to other people.
Right.
It's because those pieces are what made us accessible for them, and they're going to grieve that just like we grieve that. So giving some, space and some kindness towards them catching up, to who we are today, you know, and also finding people and spaces where you don't have to explain that, you know, finding homes where they already know you've left that piece down there and it doesn't get brought up. And now you're finding a home and acceptance for who exists right now. And so I think people are always, sometimes they're the loud minorities, you know? And so how do we then hush that and tune in? I think for me, I had too many voices in my head. I had too many people, too many mentors, too many pastors, everyone telling me how to be and how not to be. And I needed to like shush all of that and figure out what made sense for me, listening to my own knowing, listening to a divine orchestrating that I feel I was already led by, and tuning into that space. And then you start to know from there, oh, yeah, no, that voice is bringing me to shame, or that voice is bringing up my past. That's not where I'm going, you know? So I think we have a really we have a really weird relationship with boundaries. They're often like used as negatives, but I think they're bridges more than they are anything else.
Yeah, that's just the whole thing of that's not who I am, that's who I was. Because it's funny if you say that. 'Cause I'm single, and a lot of times I have conversations with people about, yeah, the girl that I am now wouldn't talk to those people I used to talk to then, because I'm not the same person. I'm not the same person. And even if somebody came to me, because there's a particular person, I never say their name, because every time I do, they show up somewhere. But there's one particular person that, you know, every now and again will show up in you know, in a DM or something like that. And I'm like, I'm not even the same person anymore. If I allowed you to be in conversation with me, you would be shocked that I'm not the same person.
I think I didn't date a whole lot, but one of the very few breakups that I did have before being married, I said exactly that. I said, I'm not even the person who I need to be to love you. Like, I'm not even that person anymore. I'm not, and I'm not the person you think you're talking to, you know, you're trying to make things work with. I'm not the same person. So I don't think this would be a benefit for you or for me, you know? But I think that honesty it might feel alarming at first, but I think it's ultimately refreshing. So maybe we need to say more of, I am not the one. I am not the one.
Well, I said, we're not the two and I'm not the one.
Right.
Yes. So I mean that is all a part of it. So thus far we've talked about, even though we got a little out of order for a second, we have the awakening, and then we have the eclipsing, then we have the mending, which we've just been talking about. The illuminating is when we have the light coming in, the chains are broken, you know, you're really beginning to walk in the fullness, unlearning things and all of that. There was a statement that you have, breathe, where you learn to breathe, release, and unfold through that. And last but not least, there is the returning.
Yeah. And even just like the space, you know, that's felt, that energy that's felt after you say the returning. If we think of traveling long and hard, or being away from our home all day, and we just come home, the bra's off, the sweats are on. It's just this level of ease and peace and comfort that just welcomes you home. Whether that's coming home to your body, like I think for me, I've had a lot of out of body moments. And so coming home to this space, doing yoga, Zumba, going on walks, being able to be like, oh, there I am. I think the same comes with the returning conversation. Like, oh, there I am. Like, there's my home. There's my safe space. It was also like, there's this idea of God that I've always known and that I've lived by, and yet I was distracted and told it was something else. You know, it's just that exhale. And it's that you're home now. Take your shoes off. Like, you get to be here. And again, I shared that the unfolding is not linear. It doesn't just, you get through all the phases and then you're done, you know. I think they loop. It's very cyclical. So I think we'll find over and over again this space of returning home. But I think having, you know, being in a marriage and in a relationship, I love coming home. I love being able to know that my partner is here and that we get to do dinner together. And that home space for me has been so healing. Going to my yoga mat is a continuous home space. Going to, you know, a local garden or the beach is a continuous home space. And when I say that, I mean that space that elicits rest, that space that elicits peace, and an understanding of, oh, there I am. There I am.
And that's so powerful, just to find a place to call home, and understanding that, yes, it can be, home can be a physical place, but sometimes it isn't. Just being,
Yeah.
you know, good in who you are, your place in life. One of the statements you had is
Mm-hmm.
like becoming who you have always been. I'm paraphrasing
So,
that, but you know,
yeah.
coming home, because I mean, an invitation to come home to yourself. That's the, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that's a part of the book title. You know, coming home to yourself, like, ooh, you know, there she is. That's the person I
Yeah.
always knew existed.
There she is, you know, and there's such an intimacy to coming home too. And I love, yeah, coming home is not a physical thing. So, but it's not a physical space, but it can be a physical space. But
Right.
ultimately, it's the thing we carry with us, a thing that we can create, you know. And also, I think it's a thing that can usher us in from different places and from different existence and through different people. And so, yeah, this concept of home, whatever that means to you, whatever that cozy thing is that you think of, can be can be a home or like a home.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
That's so powerful. I'm just a couple of things. Coming out of hiding, learning not to shrink. These are some of the
Yeah.
things that you talk about. I can't read my own writing. Today I exist.
Yes.
Understanding
Yes.
how you exist and
Yeah,
loving
I think
yourself.
a lot of the poems and the messages and the conversations that I put in the returning are ones that hopefully create an exhale, you know,
Mhm.
that we realize how much there's so much in the beauty of moving forward, and that we're not stuck. And so a lot of the poems that you find in the returning section is, yeah, hopefully a return. For me, a lot of it is my yoga mat, coming to terms with, you know, this idea of God, like I said, and I'll share actually the art of loving yourself,
Yes, I was going to say
part
that we
three.
talked a lot, but you need to
Yes,
share
I'm like, we're talking about it, but so the art of loving yourself, this is on page 200. This is part three. So there's actually three of these little poems tucked in different parts of the book. So this is the final one. Throw a party just for you. Buy your favorite snacks. Do not count the calories. Put your favorite flowers in a vase. And invite all the parts of you that you wish to hide. Learn to celebrate all of them. Throw confetti just because. Play your favorite song. Dance barefoot. Exhale. Repeat. This is what it means to finally be free.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Celebrate yourself. Celebrate
Hmm.
yourself. Celebrate the person that you have become and are still becoming.
And are
And
still becoming.
right, I think that's something oftentimes that's hard for us. And I love the way the book kind of works through that. You know, it's
Yeah.
hard to, you know, accept yourself sometimes, to understand that you might think differently or process things differently. In
Right.
the book, of course, a lot of this, as we've already talked about, is your faith journey and understanding that, okay, maybe you know, maybe for me, going to the family church isn't the space for me
Right.
to thrive
Uh-huh.
spiritually. You know, maybe
Hmm.
I do a little church and I do a little. Some people don't like yoga. You know, some people got
Yeah.
issues with yoga. You know, I do a little church,
Yes,
I do a
they
little
do.
yoga, I do a little
Uh-huh.
crystals, I do a little tarot. You know, whatever
Right.
it is,
Right.
it can be a
Right.
little African traditional religions. It can be
Yeah.
a mixture. I heard someone say not too long ago that they are spiritually fluid. You know, we hear sexually fluid, but
Yes.
spiritually fluid.
I love that.
So it's like what they need in that moment is, you know, kind of
Yeah.
where they go, but that doesn't mean, you know, that don't mean they don't love Jesus.
Right. Right. I
If they
think the conversation
identify
is a
as
lot
Christian,
it's a lot
yeah,
bigger. We've made the conversation too small. So I think when people expand it, it's disorienting, but it doesn't mean it's wrong. And then I think for me, I just kept hearing how wrong all these differences were. And I'm like, but I had felt most connected, the most quiet, the most peace on a yoga mat,
Right.
and that became a part of my practice. And not just a physical and a practice, but also very spiritual practice, and one that I'm very, very grateful for. I think I would be in a very different place. This book would probably be a very different book
Right.
if not for having had practice breath and yoga, and there's some meditations in there as well. And I feel like those resonate a little bit better with the audio book, but also an opportunity for you to read them over yourself as well as you walk yourself through the meditations.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
And once again, Arielle, I really appreciate you for this book.
Thank
I devoured
you.
it,
Thank you.
in the midst of, kind of some things I said I had been going through over the previous
Yeah.
days, when I picked it up and started diving in, I'm like, oh yes, this is right on time, just helping me to navigate, my own personal space. And even though it might, as I said earlier, it's a different story, but I can still get a lot
Yeah.
from it. At the end of each of those sections, there is a place where, for reflections, where, because I was
Mhm.
reading, I didn't necessarily do them, but I can go
Mhm.
back. I plan to go back and get a little
You can
journal
go
and just
back. Yes.
and kind of work through some of those things as to how these things play out in our lives, because being able to tell our own stories in our own way is a part of that healing process as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. So, what is it that you have going on? Places that we can look for you? Because I know the book has only been out a little over a week or a couple of
A
weeks.
little over a week. Yeah, it was
Yes,
a week
yes. I
as
know
of
you still got a lot going
yesterday.
on.
So it's fresh. I'm doing a lot of like chats like this, different podcasts and interviews on Instagram. So you can find me over there. If you're local to LA, I'll be at Reparations Club, which is a Black woman owned bookstore in Los Angeles on April 7th. And hopefully some more events that will pop up in between there. But my home base is Instagram, and you can find me mostly over there.
All right, and that has been scrolling, so you can see that
Yes.
there. If you go to her YouTube channel, she's got a beautiful, there is a beautiful trailer for the book, and some of your other
Yes.
work and poetry and things like that. So, are you still, I know you're promoting the book and talking about the book. Are
Yeah.
you still doing like some of the poetry readings and things like that
Mhm.
apart from it as well?
Yes, I have a few. If you're familiar with So Far Sounds, which is a show, they're kind of like they just pop up events wherever you are. So I'll be doing some LA So Far shows, as well as like I go to open mics quite a bit. So I'll post about it if I show up. Sometimes I'm kind of sneaky and I just pop in, share a poem or don't, and I just be there.
Mhm.
But I am doing some So Far Sounds, which are specifically poetry shows. My next one is on March 28th, but that again is here in LA. And again, hopefully some more digital ones to come as well.
All right. Well, that sounds good. Well, everybody, it's been such a pleasure to have Arielle with us. Please go pick up The Unfolding. It's a
Yes.
really good book. It will help you to come
Thank
home to
you.
yourself, just help you learn a lot and, maybe understand some of the things that you've been going through that you didn't have, the language for. It
Yeah.
definitely helped me in that regard. Say, oh, okay, yeah,
Wonderful.
I have been unfolding. I have been coming
Yes.
to who I want to be. And so this is
Wow.
just really perfect timing, and it's really powerful. And I hope that you all will grab copies and share them with others, because I think I told you earlier, I told my mom, yeah, this is the one. She talked, she's always like, Marcie, you interview so many people, you talk about so many books, I don't know. I'm like,
Right.
this is one of them to add to the repertoire. This is a good one. So
Thank you.
oh, you're
Thank you.
so
Thank
welcome.
you.
So if you can hold on for me for just a moment, I'm going to do
Yeah.
like a little closing announcements, let them know what's up, but I do
Okay.
want to say a proper goodbye to you. So hold on for just a
Yeah.
second. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure to be here with Arielle and just really talk about a book that, I truly enjoyed. And I've got all my little notes and stuff folded down. I will go back to it continuously to read the poems, to work through the different reflections, and things like that, because it's just a really good book to help navigate changes and things like that in your life. So I hope that you pick it up and do that. So by means of what's up next week, we will have with us Dr. Lanisha T. Adams, who is the author of Me Power, which is basically about, it's another way of thinking of empower, but it's about me power. How do you work within your own power? So that is next week. And then getting back a bit into the space of faith, in 2 weeks, we're going to have LaVon Briggs on to talk about sensual faith. So I know that's going to be a very interesting topic for a lot of people to talk about, that sensual faith, the art of coming home to your body. So yeah, we're coming home yet again here real soon. It's all about coming home and learning to operate in our own fullness. So thanks for everyone for joining, and I definitely look forward to seeing you again. If you have any questions or just want to reach out, shout out, say hello, you can reach me at editor@browngirlcollective.com. So please feel free to do that. And if you're in the market for any of the books that show up here, you can visit the Brown Girl Collective bookstore at Brown Girl Collective Bookstore, and that will take you to our shop on Bookshop. So thanks again for your time and your energy. It's been such a pleasure, as always, to have you here, and I look forward to seeing you again the next time. And in the meantime, continue to stay well and live well. Have a good one. Bye-bye.